Some Pokemon clearly had real effort put into their design. They are visually interesting and have signature flair like a unique ability or move that gives them a very distinct identity. And unfortunately, many of these unique snowflakes are horrible in competitive play. One such example is Cramorant. I like Cramorant, and it's a popular Pokemon with a likable and goofy visual design. Cramorant also has a completely unique ability. Only Cramorant has this ability, and it's quite a good one. Gulp Missile. If Cramorant uses the move Surf or Dive, it will dive into the water and try to catch a living creature in its mouth. This is because Cramorant is a ruthless predator with murderous intent. If Cramorant is above 50% of its HP, it will catch an Arrokuda, which will temporarily put Cramorant into its gulping form, where the Arrokuda is visible in its mouth. When in this form, if Cramorant is struck by an attack, it will spit the Arrokuda back at the attacker. Using this little fish as a weapon, very ingenious. This will deal 25% of the attacker's max HP and lower their defense by 1 stage. Quite a powerful effect if you ask me. After this, Cramorant will revert back to its normal, non-gulping form. If Cramorant uses Surf or Dive when below 50% of its HP, it will instead catch a Pikachu in its mouth. I don't know what a Pikachu is doing in the ocean, but regardless, if Cramorant catches a Pikachu, it enters the gorging form, and if it is struck by an attack while in the gorging form, it will shoot the Pikachu at the opponent, dealing 25% of their max HP to them, and also paralyzing them, because Pikachu is an electrical Pokemon that can inflict paralysis. I honestly think this is one of the best ability designs in the whole series. Surf is quite a strong move already, and this elevates it with this unique effect for Cramorant specifically. It's a very fun idea with the Cramorant diving in to catch something in the water upon using Surf, and each of the different forms it can transform into depending on what it catches in the water, doing different things. Very fun. Unfortunately though, Cramorant is unable to really leverage this fantastic and extremely well-designed and unique ability for much competitive benefit, as this is a very low-ranked Pokemon. It is ranked ZU in Gen 8, which is the lowest possible tier, and it is ranked PU in Gen 9, the second lowest. And the simple and unfortunate reason for this is that Cramorant has extremely low stats. Its HP is only 70, its defense is a measly 55. It actually has a pretty good special defense stat of 95, but Cramorant's typing of water flying doesn't really lend itself well to taking special hits when you're so vulnerable to electric type attacks with a ×4 weakness, and many special attackers carry electric coverage. And there are cases in competitive Pokemon where you can overcome stats like these if your ability is truly outstanding. The most classic example is probably Clefable with Magic Guard. Its stats are not the best, but Magic Guard is just that broken. Gulp Missile, by comparison, is a good ability for sure. It has a very strong effect, but it's not quite good enough to elevate Cramorant to actual competitive viability here. Cramorant still has to actually execute the move Surf to enable it to catch the fish from the ocean, and then, if the enemy strikes it, it will do something good. It will damage them and lower their defense or paralyze them on hit. But when you think about it, this is a multiple turn setup. You have to switch in Cramorant, survive a hit in the first place, execute Surf, and then hopefully survive another hit to stick around. If you just get one proc of Gulp Missile, it's good, you deal a bit of damage to them, but that's not gonna make or break a game or anything. Whereas an ability like Magic Bounce or Magic Guard is immediately good at all times, and will often have an instant advantageous effect. Magic Guard can completely soak status moves or any residual damage move and waste the enemy's turn. It significantly enhances your bulk. It's one of the best abilities in the game, this is obvious. Despite being a unique handcrafted ability that perfectly fits with the vibe of Cramorant and is quite good, it's not earth-shattering enough to elevate Cramorant that significantly. I actually think there's a subtle change you could make to Cramorant that would be really good for it, and that would be the simple change of swapping its defense and special defense stats. When it is used in these lower tiers, it's often used as a physical wall. It invests fully in its defense with a plus nature, and full HP, or at least mostly into its physical defense. And that's because the typing and the Gulp Missile ability lend themselves well to the role of a physical wall. If it had 95 defense, that would actually be workable, and it could get much more out of its Gulp Missile ability with more raw bulk to survive hits more frequently and go fishing to its heart's content. At least Cramorant can say that it is a good Pokemon in the lower tiers it finds itself in, with its nice water flying typing and a heavy duty boots to make up for its rock weakness, plus its solid move pool that has Roost for a reliable form of healing, the crucial utility of Defog as well, and a Surf that not only acts as a strong form of water stab, but also a way to spread paralysis and deal residual damage to the opponent via the outstanding Gulp Missile ability. Cramorant is not a Pokemon with higher aspirations. It is content in the PU tier of Gen 9, and it finds itself quite happy there, going fishing and providing valuable defog utility to teams and assisting trainers in their motives. Cramorant is considered a virtuous Pokemon, and a desirable one in the right contexts. Another example of a unique Pokemon that isn't very good is Ice-Cube. This is a penguin that uses a cunning tactic to try and survive beyond its years on the battlefield. Ice-Cube has crafted a big helmet for itself out of a solid block of ice, and that is its ability, the ability Ice Face. The Ice Face acts as a shield, and the first physical hit that Ice-Cube takes will deal 0 damage, like a free substitute almost. If hail or snow is up, the Ice Face will also be restored at the end of every turn. This is kind of amazing actually. It's almost like being completely immune to physical attacks while in the hail, because every time you break the Ice Face, they take no damage and the Ice Face just forms again out of the hail. A truly unprecedented level of power. When the Ice Face is broken, Ice-Cube enters its No Ice form, where it has a much higher speed stat and a lower defense stat. A common way that Ice-Cube is used is with a belly drum set. Since it has this nice safety net against an incoming physical hit, you can substitute and then belly drum to gain the Selakberry boost, since you're at 25% HP after that, and you're also at a maxed out attack thanks to belly drum. And from there, hopefully you can sweep the game, outrunning everything and defeating them with overwhelming damage, since your attack is as high as it can possibly be. So Ice-Cube has this completely unique ability and effect that is quite flavorful, can I say. It's a block of ice, so it only blocks physical hits. It makes sense that a magical attack would not care that the penguin has ice around its head, but if you try to punch the ice, you may break the ice, but Ice-Cube underneath the Ice Face will be unharmed. I also like that it restores the Ice Face in hail or snow, as if the hail around Ice-Cube is used as a material with which to construct the Ice Face again. Not only a very creative ability design that fits with the flavor of this specific Pokemon, but also a unique form of weather synergy, one that we've never seen before. Unfortunately though, there is a glaring flaw with this ability despite sounding so amazing, and that is the fact that special attacks just hit right through it. All that time spent molding a helmet out of ice, and a simple magical blast undoes all your work, Ice-Cube. You should have thought of that before you invested your life into this work. That was short-sighted of you. Special attacks are obviously everywhere in competitive Pokemon, so it is not difficult to deal with Ice-Cube by simply attacking it with a special move. Also, even with the Ice Face shielding it from a physical hit, the Pokemon does have some pretty glaring flaws as a physical attacker. Its move pool is extremely limited. It has decent options for Ice Stab, like Icicle Crash, which is a good move, a perfectly fine move, but Ice-Cube has very limited options for coverage. It has Iron Head, which is a steel type attack. That's something, I suppose, but it doesn't really hit things that ice can't hit. You need something that complements ice. There's Liquidation and Waterfall for water coverage, also not amazing. There is Zen Headbutt for psychic coverage. And beyond that, there's not much else. You have Double Edge, which is a good neutral attack, but you're so low on 25% HP, you're probably going to end yourself with the recoil. The same is true of Head Smash for for rock coverage, which has even more recoil. So even if Ice-Cube successfully uses its Ice Face for the belly drum opportunity, it's actually pretty easy to wall with anything that just simply resists ice, since its complementary coverage is not even that amazing. It's probably going to go with Zen Headbutt or Iron Head. And it's pretty likely you will have something that can survive a hit from it and just strike back for that final 25% damage to end it. Ice-Cube also finds itself vulnerable to absolutely any priority move, as it is extremely low, and yes, it may outrun most things in the game, but a priority move will easily do 25% and finish off the Ice-Cube handily. Ice-Cube is a very unique Pokemon, and it's one that can absolutely catch an enemy off guard if they're not prepared for its Ice Face technique. And it is great at using the element of surprise to defeat an unaware opponent. But if you're aware of what Ice-Cube has up its sleeve, it's pretty easy to stop. Any special attacker will just completely threaten its life instantaneously before it can even do its nonsense. But even if it does pull off its sub-belly drum combo, it's not even that reliable at ending the game from there. Plenty of things can stop it, and a simple priority move will just cut Ice-Cube's lifespan short right then and there. I do commend Ice-Cube. At the end of the day, underneath that helmet, this is just a normal penguin from real life. Many of them would not survive for a second in the Pokemon universe. They would not stand a chance. Ice-Cube is at least using its intellect to construct a helmet for itself for defense. And that's the best option it has given the harsh reality it lives in. And yes, it may have glaring flaws that are exploitable, but at least it's something. At least Ice-Cube is trying to cling to life in a world that wants it gone. Next we have Cursola, another Pokemon with a completely unique ability. I think Cursola is quite an inspired Pokemon. A diseased piece of coral that is a mono-ghost type. And Cursola has the unique ability Perish Body. If an enemy makes physical contact with Cursola, it will activate the Perish Song effect. Perish Song is a move that applies to both the user and the opponent, and it will cause each of these Pokemon to faint in 3 turns, unless they switch out. To have this effect attached to an ability is very interesting, and is something we had never seen before Cursola. Pretty good ability design for the Pokemon too, as if touching it inflicts a curse or a disease upon both you and the one who made contact. Cursola itself also has some pretty promising looking stats. Its special attack is enormous at 145, and so is its special defense of base 130. However, it's extremely slow. It has a terrible defense stat of only 50, and its HP is also very low at only base 60. The culmination of all this is a Pokemon with a strange identity. You'd think Cursola would be pretty good as a special wall, but a Ghost is not the best type for a special wall, since you are weak to the common special attacking types of Ghost itself and also Dark. This, combined with Cursola's incredibly low physical defense and HP, results in a Pokemon that is not that functional as a defensive entity, even in the ZU tier. Even here it's outclassed by contemporaries like Cofagrigus. The ability Perish Body also mostly just ends up being an awkward detriment. First of all, physical contact is usually achieved with a physical attack. There are some exceptions, but most of the time if you make physical contact, it's with a physical attack, and Cursola is not that amazing at taking physical hits. But even when it does, now the Perish Song is applying to the enemy, but also it's applying to Cursola itself, meaning that you also eventually have to switch out from the field, and this is not always a good thing. In fact, there's this opportunity for the enemy to deliberately set Perish Song, sometimes in situations that are more advantageous to them, forcing you out of the field. Since the enemy can control when the Perish Song activates too, they can use it to their benefit. It's not always good for you. For this reason, Cursola would rather not even run Perish Body and use its alternative ability Weak Armor, which allows it to gain a bit of speed if struck by a physical attack at the cost of -1 defense. This at least allows it to be used as some sort of special attacking wall breaker. Its speed is extremely low at only base 30, but Weak Armor allows it to overcome that a little bit, and then with a Choice Specs and Shadow Ball, as well as some nice coverage in the form of Earth Power and Power Gem, you can at least be a decent special attacker. However, even this isn't that good in Gen 8 ZU, as You are still quite slow, even with the weak armor boost, which is not even a reliable way to boost your speed. You are often still contending with that very low speed. Also, it doesn't help that apparently the number one Pokemon of Gen 8 ZU is Miltank, and Miltank is of course immune to Shadow Ball. What are you going to do against Miltank, you fool? Corsola is outclassed by other special attackers in ZU as well. I can't find any examples of people using Corsola in Gen 9 ZU either. It seems even in the very lowest tier, Corsola is struggling to achieve anything, getting very little out of it, both its defensive and offensive traits. And unfortunately, the ability Perish Body is largely a detriment for it. Despite being quite unique and seeming to be promising, it is just something that creates more problems for this terribly tragic creature. What an awful predicament Corsola has found itself in, suffering from a disease at the bottom of the ocean, and then even in the context of competitive singles, failing to find any competitive niche for itself whatsoever, even in the lowest possible tier. I will give them credit for at least trying to make something unique here. Unfortunately, what they made was not very functional in practice. Up next we have Palossand, who is a delightful Pokemon. Palossand is a ghostly sand castle, inhabited by a soul. It is a ghost ground type, and it also has an exclusive ability that only it has access to, the ability Water Compaction. Water Compaction is an ability that grants +2 defense if struck by a water type move. This Pokemon was clearly designed by a sand castle understander, a rare breed of individual these days. Most do not understand anything about sand castles, but if you know anything, sand that is engulfed in water is more structurally sound and can be used to build things such as a castle, whereas non-wet sand cannot be used for structural integrity. It would make sense that this sand castle Pokemon would gain defense when struck by water, as the sand would harden and be more defensively sound. Very genius and logical design. However, despite having this very unique ability that lines up perfectly with real-world logic and is considered very scientifically accurate, Palossand is ranked in the low tier of ZU. Anyway, what? You're telling me logical consistency doesn't matter in terms of Pokemon viability? That can't be true. What do you mean? Regrettably, there's a big problem with this ability on Palossand, and that is the simple fact that ground types are weak to water. So you got this ability that is centering on getting hit by a water type attack to activate, but water type attacks threaten Palossand with lethal force. It does not want to be struck by water, as it is going to take double damage from such an attack and likely perish. There is also the simple question of what if this water type move is a special attack, which is very common. Scald, Surf, Hydro Pump, any of these will activate the defense boost, but this will be completely useless against the incoming special attack. This is an ability that is good in theory, but is terrible on a Pokemon weak to water, because you have to get hit by a move you're weak to activate the ability. This is completely dysfunctional in any practical environment, and unfortunately it's kind of a waste on this Pokemon. It's sometimes going to help you, I suppose, if you can survive a physical water type attack that's rather weak. You get a bit of a benefit, but the positives of this are marginal and it's largely useless for the Pokemon. Palossand seems alright with decent stats. They're not completely horrible. Its typing has its merit. It's got healing and stealth rock and such, but the Pokemon is just average, unfortunately. It's outclassed by other ground and ghost types in every other higher tier, and in ZU it's alright. But that's the only context where it can really exist, unfortunately. It's a shame because I like the Pokemon in terms of its design and concept. I do wish Water Compaction just came with a water immunity. I don't even know if that would be super insane. I don't think this would be an OU level Pokemon even with that. But unfortunately here we stand in a world where Palossand is a structure made of sand that can be emboldened by the water but also struck down by a wave that is powerful enough. Up next is Frostmoth, and I can't help but notice, folks, that many of these Pokemon I'm talking about are from Gen 8. I guess this was a generation where they decided to give a lot of Pokemon these completely unique abilities and effects, devoting some real creative energy into these creatures only for them to be rather terrible in a practical context. But regardless, Frostmoth is another example of a Pokemon that is a unique snowflake distinct among other snowflakes. First of all, visually stunning creature, an ice bug. It is beautiful and majestic and magical. Love the visual design of this Pokemon. And Frostmoth's ability is the unbelievable Ice Scales, which is in a vacuum one of the strongest abilities in the whole series. Ice Scales grants this Pokemon the effect of receiving half damage from all special attacks. This is just an insanely good effect. For obvious reasons. Half damage from an entire category of move. Unbelievable. And Frostmoth was seemingly designed to use this outstanding ability to leverage the bulk from that for a Quiver Dance sweep setup. Quiver Dance is one of the strongest boosting moves in the game that very few things get. Frostmoth was blessed with this option. It's a boost that raises your special attack, special defense, and speed by 1 in a single turn. Frostmoth has the excellent Ice Beam for Ice-type special stab, and it's got a great special attack stat of base 125. So what's the problem? Why is Frostmoth ranked all the way down in the PU tier in both Gen 8 and Gen 9? Despite being so beautiful and having one of the strongest abilities ever heard of, and one of the best boosting moves in all of the series. Well, these are all great advantages, but Frostmoth is unfortunately bogged down by the disadvantages that it also has. Frostmoth has perhaps the worst possible typing in the game. It's at least in the running. Ice and Bug is truly atrocious. Frostmoth has a terrible ×4 weakness to both Fire-type attacks and Rock-type attacks. Rock weakness is always terrible to have, as you're vulnerable to Stealth Rock, and Rock is a pretty common attacking type. Fire weakness also absolutely horrible. Frostmoth is also weak to Flying and Steel, and doesn't have many good resistances to make up for these terrible shortcomings defensively. It seems that Ice Scales was partially designed to be so overpowered to counterbalance the typing being so bad, but the typing is so bad that Ice Scales still doesn't help quite enough. Fire-type special attacks, even though they're dealing half as much damage, will still threaten Frostmoth with incredible lethality, and of course any super effective physical move is lights out. The other drawback of Frostmoth is its rather unfortunate stats. These aren't completely terrible, especially the special attack that is quite high actually, but 60 base defense is very rough, especially when your typing is already leaving you wide open to so much. This Pokemon's physical bulk is pretty much non-existent here. 70 HP can work if your defenses are good enough, but it's not very much to write home about at all, is it? And even the special defense is only base 90. It's elevated significantly by Ice Scales. Your special bulk actually ends up being pretty good, but still, the fire weakness is just such a terrible detriment. And also Frostmoth is quite slow with only 65 speed, so even if it can find opportunities to Quiver Dance, it's still not quite fast enough oftentimes to take full advantage of this boost. Frostmoth ends up being rather terrible at actually doing what it was designed to do. It is threatened by a lot, it has few entry points. Once it has Quiver Danced, some simple speed control can get out ahead of the Frostmoth and threaten it in many different ways, since it has so many weaknesses. And that low physical bulk is just always such an issue. Any physical priority move will make quick work of this Pokemon. At least in Gen 9, Frostmoth can terrestrialize to overcome its horrible typing and get more out of its ability with a better typing, but this is a significant commitment, and even then, you're still contending with that terrible physical bulk that is still a tremendously exploitable weak point. Being able to terrestrialize is not enough of a buff for Frostmoth to elevate it out of the low tier of PU. Up next is Bombardier, another Gen 9 Pokemon. Bombardier is cool because it's a stork Pokemon with a flap on its stomach that it lifts up with its beak to look like the classic image of a stork carrying a baby, like in Yoshi's Island. This is an interesting concept, that the wrap that carries the baby in such an image is actually part of the bird itself, as if to nurture life is baked into the biology of the Pokemon and the creature. This says a lot about Bombardier's moral capacity and its sense of duty. Bombardier also has a completely unique ability that is very interesting. Bombardier has the ability Rocky Payload. With Rocky Payload, Bombardier has a 1.5 times multiplier applied to its offensive stat whenever it uses a rock-type attack. So the ability is basically applying a same type attack bonus to rock-type moves, as they do 1.5 times more damage. A very interesting ability that Bombardier does have the tools to take advantage of, as Bombardier has access to the move Stone Edge, which is a high power rock type attack, boosted by this Rocky Payload ability. Bombardier is a Gen 9 Pokemon, and unfortunately this guy is not that good in its debut game, and is only ranked in the PU tier despite having this unique ability that seems quite strong. And this is not too surprising when you look at its stats. Even with this unique ability, Bombardier is just not really going to cut it in the Gen 9 power level. For the higher tiers, it only has 103 attack. It's pretty slow, it's not very bulky either. Only 85 in each of its defenses and 70 HP. This is not really a top tier Pokemon, and the Rocky Payload ability is not strong enough to buff it that much. But what's even more tragic, I think, about Bombardier is the fact that even in the tiers where it's used, in PU, even here it's actually not even using its Rocky Payload ability. It prefers to use the ability Big Pecs, which has the more boring effect of just making you immune to having your defense lowered. Why would Bombardier use this over its powerful Rocky Payload ability, which is exclusive and has such a novel effect? What the hell, Bombardier? Many things have Big Pecs, that's not special at all. Well, the reason is because a rock-type attack on this is not really that advantageous. It would rather just lean into its dark-type attacking options like Knock Off and Sucker Punch. And if it uses another attack, it's probably simply going to be U-turn, so it can pivot and apply momentum. It also has other things that are more worthy of a move slot, like Roost for straightforward healing, and Stealth Rock as a powerful entry hazard. Perhaps also Taunt. I'd say one of Bombardier's strengths is actually its move pool. It has a lot of great options. Sucker Punch is a great form of priority. You even have Parting Shot as an alternative pivoting option. You got healing and utility and pivoting and knock off, great dark stab. So Stone Edge doesn't really fit here. There's so many other useful things to use, and no set would really justify Stone Edge anywhere. It feels like a bit of a waste to not take advantage of that extra stab damage on it, but in reality, Bombardier doesn't really need it or want it, and therefore Big Pecs is superior just because you're often not even running a rock move, and Rocky Payload would be completely useless in that case. I also will be honest and say that I didn't really understand the association with this Pokemon and rocks. Apparently it's because it likes to put rocks in its stalk pouch thing and then drop them from above to attack people as a strategic maneuver. And therefore it does more damage with rocks, and also has the move Stealth Rock and stuff, which would seem to be a bit random on a bird, but it's because the Pokemon is able to carry rocks in its pouch and use them for its offensive stratagem. I've learned something today. I've learned that birds can be quite smart. They're some of the smartest animals, in fact, aren't they? I've heard that crows are able to communicate in their own language and understand concepts like trade, which sort of frightens me when I see one. You'd think it's just a bird that doesn't know anything, but he understands economics and stuff, and he can communicate with other crows. Kind of freaks me out when I think about it too much. So I try not to think about things like that. But Bombardier is clearly smart and can use rocks, which are like a weapon. That's pretty cool. Also, in my last video, I actually spoke about the ability Big Pecs. What a coincidence. And everybody told me that I'm stupid, as usual. They often say this. And they said, Jim, this is a pun. It's wordplay. The reason that Big Pecs offers a immunity to defense drops is because it's a similar sounding phrase to Big Pecs, as in pectoral muscles on a bodybuilder or something like that. And if someone did have big pectoral muscles, it would make sense that in a battling context they could be immune to having their defense dropped due to the defensive benefit of the muscles. However, can I push back against this and say that the Pokemon that have the ability Big Pecs aren't particularly muscular looking? Is Bombardier sort of a skinny stalk? Let's also search Big Pecs. It might make sense if it was like a bodybuilder themed bird, you know, like a Buzzwole bird version or something like that. Could have Big Pecs, but it's on like a swan. It's on a swan, for goodness sake, that has Big Pecs, or Mandibuzz, who is a vulture. I sort of understand the joke now. I get the joke, but I still want to question the logic of, like, a joke doesn't just create value out of thin air if it doesn't line up with what's actually happening, because these birds are not bodybuilders. I've never seen them at the gym. They are not muscular like a Machamp or Buzzwole. They should have Big Pecs ability, if your logic is lining up here, but they don't have any. Their defense can be dropped, whereas Bombardier's defense cannot be dropped because peck sounds like pectorial. Its wordplay seems to carry incredible cosmic significance in Pokemon. If you make a joke about the Pokemon, it receives the power of the joke, like Azumarill having huge power, which is a joke in Japanese about rabbits having power or something. I don't even know what the joke is, but because it's a joke, Azumarill, which is a little rabbit, has the highest attack stat you can get in the game because of a mere quip. A mere quip can carry such incredible significance. They're telling me to stop talking because I'm making too much sense and I'm breaking down barriers and I'm saying things that are brave that no one else dares to say. So I will stop for my own good. And finally, I would like to discuss Graplocked because I don't think anybody ever discusses Graplocked. This is a Pokemon they want to forget exists. It's from Gen 8 and they didn't put it in the game in Gen 9. They don't seem to care about it. But it's an interesting Pokemon. It's a horrible Pokemon, one of the worst they've ever made, in fact, in a competitive context, but Graplocked is certainly interesting. First of all, this is an octopus. There's not a water type, despite that seeming to be an obvious choice, but this is an octopus that breaks the mold a little bit, does not live in the water and lives on the land, and is a martial artist. This Pokemon is a mono-fighting type. It's an octopus that's a mono-fighting type, really breaking the mold of its species and reinventing what it means to be an octopus. Graplocked also has an exclusive move called Octolock. Octolock is kind of a great move actually in a vacuum. At least in some ways, Octolock will trap the enemy directly, similar to a move like Mean Look. And then also it has an added benefit, because every single turn, the enemy will lose one stage of defense and special defense. So it's better than just a straightforward trapping effect like Mean Look. It also comes with this rather unique effect. I don't think other moves have an effect like this where every turn they lose stats repeatedly. This has kind of a high potential. You trap them, maybe you substitute repeatedly until their defense is so low that now they can die in a single hit to whatever your move is. A way to seal the opponent in a checkmate situation. Sign their death warrant. Unfortunately though, Graplocked is kind of the worst guy ever at actually using this unique move because it's slow and its bulk is average. It has a pretty good attack stat of 118, but it's not exactly the Pokemon that wants to waste its time running a trapping support move like this. Graplocked can run a set something like this with Octolock and Substitute to trap the enemy, have them lower their defense repeatedly, and then Substitute to pass the turns. But it has to be against something slower. It has to be against something that can't threaten it, which just isn't really very realistic. Also, awkwardly, Graplocked does have the great ability Technician, but it doesn't really want to use it. It doesn't have that many great options for moves that are 60 power or less. So for that reason, you rather just run Limber, which grants paralysis immunity. This at least might give Graplocked an entry point against a Thunder Wave or Glare or some other paralysis inflicting move that it can then use to get the Octolock going. Drain Punch seems to make sense as a physical stab of choice, which heals you after the Octolock situation. But the Pokemon just isn't that amazing at using this option. Even in Gen 8 ZU, it seems to be outclassed by other similar fighting types with superior bulk, perhaps access to the Eviolite, like a Gurdurr, who is a better creature in that environment. Graplocked might be interesting, but it's not very effective, is it? And that's a common theme for this whole video. Interesting, but not good. Thank you for watching to the end. Because you have watched to the end, you have been visited by the Seal of Good Fortune. The Seal of Good Fortune grants you 1,000 years of prosperity. And this does extend not only to your family, but to your friends. Consider yourself extremely lucky for this once-in-a-lifetime moment. All because you watched to the end. How good of you.